Hi guys, it's your boy Six. Now, in recent years, frameworks have actually been taking over the developer community by storm. And essentially, most of what a framework does is actually just write a lot of boilerplate code for you so you, the developer, can focus on the task at hand. In terms of front-end web development frameworks, the most popular in terms of GitHub stars is Vue.js. In this video, we're going to be covering some of the core concepts of Vue.js, things like components, routing, properties, and some of the more, advanced topics of Vue.js are actually going to come in later videos, such as directives and a bit more deeper concepts. I hope you guys learn a lot from this video. Enjoy. So now we're here and we're actually trying to create a new Vue.js project. Now, before all of this begins, I will assume you've already gotten NPM and you've already gotten Node downloaded on your machine. The version of Linux that I'm using right now, in case anybody was interested, is actually called Elementary OS. Now we're actually going to get into this project. So the first thing I want to do to start any Vue project is go into a folder of some sorts to put all my code in. For me, that's code demos when it comes to the code 6 channel. So I'm just going to right click and open this in the terminal, and you'll see why I do that in just a second. All right, so now code demos is open in the terminal, and code demos is, let's go into that now. Just a few test files. So what we want to do to start a new Vue.js project is this: Vue init, the kind of template that you want to use, and for this example, we're going to be using Webpack. And now, finally, you want to do the name of the project, and for that, I'm just going to say starter. But you can call this last parameter whatever you want to call it. As soon as you hit enter, it's going to generate a new Vue project. Project name starter, yes, that's correct. Project description, that we can leave default. Author, that's me. Build, we want to do runtime plus compiler, and that's just basically the standard and the default, as you guys can see, so just press enter on that. Install Vue router, yes, please don't skip over this option because we'll need it inside this demonstration. Use ESLint for your code, no. Set up unit tests, just do the defaults for that one. Yes, you want to use NPM and not yarn because all my demonstrations and tutorial will be on NPM. Installing dependencies, and our project is going to get started in just a minute. And there we are, our new Vue.js project is actually in our folder. So if you look, you'll see the project starter. Now what we want to do is open this entire folder, which is your Vue.js project, by the way. Open this folder inside a text editor of your choosing. And for this, we're going to open this one up inside Atom. Everything always opens on my left screen for some reason, but that's completely fine. All right, so now we are actually inside our Vue.js project. You guys have done a great job so far. You have a Vue.js project. Now, just a couple of things I want to go through. Most of the work that you're going to be doing, and I mean 99.9% of the time, you're going to be working inside the source folder. You might be working inside the index.html folder, if you're going to attach things like a Bootstrap CDN or something of those kind of lines. But for the most part, you're going to be working inside the source folder. So we're going to go ahead and open the source folder. And let me close this out just not to confuse anyone. So now inside the source folder, we have things like our assets. You're going to have like a logo in there. Your images are going to go in there. That's what your assets are actually for. SVGs, PNGs, things like that. Your components are actually going to be, well, I'm going to explain components a little bit later, but each piece of this page, that's the one good thing about frameworks, is that you can section off each piece of a page at a time and put it into something kind of like a component. Each component has its own logic, everything. So that's why you see an index.html page, but when we run this, we're actually going to see the hello world component, and I'm going to show you guys that in just a second. You have the router, which basically just tells you which components to pull up in the view. and you have your app.vue, which basically just lays out the basic home page. Your main.js is where your Vue instance lives. So basically, what we're going to do now is run this project first before we do anything else, just so you guys can actually see. I just wanted to give you guys a quick overview of what goes on under the hood. So we're going to come here to our terminal, and we are going to do npm run dev. This is the command that actually runs Vue.js projects, and I'm going to drag this over just a bit so you can actually see the whole command. Well, I guess not. So that's going to build our project, and now it says that we're running on localhost 8080. So that's fine. So we're going to open up a browser and we're going to check this out. Localhost 8080, and there you go. It's your first Vue.js application, but this application doesn't do anything. It's just there. It looks like a page simply. That's completely fine. We're going to change that around. Now, if you guys notice what this is, the top is a logo, right? And if we come back to our, I believe it's the index.html, it actually seems like it's inside the app.vue, and basically this logo is just on top of something right here called a router view. Now, if I remove this logo, you're going to see something happen in our actual page. We're just going to save that. It automatically rebuilds your project. The logo's gone. But there's a weird tag here that we see something called router view. Now, what you need to understand about router view is that whatever component you load onto the page will be displayed in place of this. Anything that you load onto this page will be displayed in place of this. And whatever comes on top of this, such as the image that was there before, no matter what happens to the main page, anything that is going to actually come on your page is going to be under router view. It's just that for the example, they actually put this image outside of the router view just so the logo pops up. I'm not really sure why they did that, but that's Vue.js and Avenue. All right, so now let's actually get into editing our component, right? So we see something called hello world.vue, and we have a bunch of stuff in here. What we're going to do is between these two template tags, remove everything. And now we're actually going to start fresh with an empty page. There's nothing here. We have nothing inside our component. So the one thing that's really nice about Vue.js is something called string interpolation. So you can actually use a mustache sort of syntax to actually display information onto the page. And just a quick layout of a Vue.js component, you actually have up at the top is your template, which is all your HTML. The middle will be your script, which is all your logic, data handling, everything that goes on JavaScript wise. And at the bottom will be your style. So everything is contained inside one page, and you can reference this one component in any part of your app, and you don't actually have to break CSS in any other place. It would keep everything self-contained. So now we're just going to do a quick div, no class, and we're just going to put an h1 inside. The h1 is fine, but if you look at the data that we return right here, and if you want to use any data in your component, you have to put it inside return down here. So MSG just means message. It has no particular meaning. You can name these whatever you want. I'm going to name something here. I want to say job. I'm going to call job developer, right? Something very simple. But if we look, we're editing information and it's not on our page. Our page is still empty and blank. Well, this is why mustache syntax comes well with string interpolation. The reason is that all we have to do is reference the name of this piece of data that we set. And we're just going to put two handlebars and we're going to type in MSG. And what happens there? If we check back in our Chrome page, wow, we actually have a message that says, welcome to your Vue.js app. What if we just add another element? Let's say we add an H3 and we do more handlebars, and let's say job. Let's push out the job. It will tell you that we're a developer. So the one thing that's really good about Vue.js is that you can actually decorate your pages to do whatever you really want. And now let's come to our styles, because that's something that's very important to us, right? So we're going to come down here and remove, well, not everything, but almost everything that they have. Actually, you know what? For the sake of this exercise, let's just remove everything except for the H1 and H2s. All right, so now we're going to do a style for our div component that we just put up there. And let's say the background should be a very light gray, or more towards the mid-colored gray side. So let's do background three sets of C0, and that will actually give us this color gray. I like things to look a little bit better. Let's actually give it a max width of, let's say, about 500 px or pixels. Save that. Let's give it a border radius of 10 pixels. Check back on our page. This is a component, but this component has been loaded into this entire page, and it doesn't bother any other part of our application. So that seems okay for our first component. And you know what? This is actually bugging me, but I have to put this in the center. So we're just gonna do display block, and the margin would be 0 auto. There we go. So the good thing about this is that when you use Vue.js, you can actually just get up and running with a modern JavaScript framework. Like I said, the most popular one in terms of GitHub stars at the time of this recording. You can use all of that just with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, the same languages that you've been used to using. Okay, so now let's actually get into creating components, because right now we see that we are inside our first component, and that's completely fine, but we're actually going to create a whole new piece to this pie. Now we're going to come in under components, and we're going to do a new file. Let's call this one second component .vue. Now your component files are going to be called .vue. This is the self-contained unit as a component. There are other ways to make components, such as how you use Vue.js with a CDN link, but this is the best way in my opinion. All right, so you're basically just going to start out by doing a template tag at the top. You're going to do a script tag in the middle and a style tag at the bottom, but I just have autocomplete, but it's the same concept for all. So I'm just going to type in template. Hit tab and it'll give me autocomplete. Now, basically what you want to have is template at the top, script with export default here, and you want to have style at the bottom, but for some reason it gives me lang CSS. You really want scoped. Scoped meaning that all the styles are going to stay within this component. All right, so that's perfect. Now let's actually set something up in our div, and you know what? We should probably just copy a lot of this information from this div into our next div. So there's MSG and there's job in there. So inside your export default, you're going to want to set data properties, and you're going to be able to do a lot more, but this is just a basic Vue component so you understand how routing works and you understand how each piece is different. All right, so you're going to do export default and you're going to do data. Now data has to be a function, and there are many reasons why it has to be a function. This is all explained inside the Vue documentation. Function called data, and it has to return the data. So now we're going to do return. And now you can actually start putting in pieces of information. So first we had MSG. MSG equals, this is the second, can't spell today for some reason, component. And job, instead of job, we're just gonna have reason. And the reason is going to be just so we can learn. All right, so now we're going to interpolate message up here. That's perfectly fine. And now we're going to drop in reason. As I said, these data properties can be whatever you really want them to be. But now you're going to see something that's very weird after we complete out the styles and just copy the same style from the last component. No need to make things very extravagant. We're just actually trying to get the basic concepts down. Boom. Our styles are now in here. Now, one thing many people might be asking is, how can I have this component pop up in another component? And just for quick measure, we're going to put this at 400px. But how can we have one component inside another component? How do we put multiple components onto a page? How do we do these things? And that is actually a very, very simple task. Now, there are two different ways to deal with components. One, you can put a component into another. Another way is that you could actually switch pages, which is routing. But the first example, we're going to drop in the second component into the first. All right, we're going to come into our script tag and we're going to do import, and we're going to import second component from, and I'm actually putting this in the wrong place. Excuse me for that one. So at the very top of your script tag before export default, import second component from, we want to do string at components slash second component. You don't have to do second component.vue, just second component. So just give us 1 second to realize where our error came from. And that was actually my mistake. I'm actually supposed to do at slash components. There we go. Very minor mistake, can actually get a lot of people frustrated, but it actually happens a lot more often with people than not. All right, so second component is now in here. But remember, we've just imported this to our normal component. It's not actually in the application yet. So we're actually going to make a new set of fields. So data would be one set of, I want to say, properties inside your script tag. So that's all your information. Now, if you're going to be using any extra components, you're actually going to make another set of properties called components. And now inside components, we're just going to call this name that we defined right here, which is second component. I'm going to drop in second component, but wait a second, it's still not done yet. To actually put second component into this first component, very simple. We've actually just created what is kind of like a custom HTML tag. So now we're just going to do a tag and say second component, and we're going to close it off. Now, when we go back to our normal page, we're going to see another component added in. Wow, this is the second component that has just been dropped into our first, but the second component doesn't look really all too appealing, and it's hard for you guys to tell the difference. So let's come back to second component, and let's just do a background of red, and let's see if we can actually do color on this one. Just so we can actually tell the difference between these two components. Perfect. Now the second component is stuck inside the first one. Let's look and see what we can do now, just to give you guys a perspective of what's actually happening here. Second component is in there. If we remove the second component, save this, come back, it's gone. So you can actually understand how this is dropping it in there. And just to recap on what actually happened under the hood was that we established a new component inside the components folder. We imported it with the name of second component into our script tag. We came and made a new set of properties called components. an inside component, and this must be named components, by the way. These ones are pretty strict. It has to be called data, it has to return, and it has to be called components. But the components that we're using in this, for now, it's just one, and it's called second component. Once we do these 3 steps, we can actually come up here and just drop in the tag, and it'll work automatically. Now, what about routing, different pages and things like that? That's one of the more important things when it comes to application building. You don't want to be just stuck on one single page, right? So we're actually going to go to a different page. We're actually going to do something with the Vue router. Before we do that, let's actually create a third component, which we're actually going to switch to completely. We're going to do a new file, and we're going to call this one third component, and of course it's a .vue file. We're going to do our template, remove all this unnecessary stuff because apparently my text editor thinks it knows what it needs, but it doesn't. Scope, perfect. And of course, let's just do our data while we're at it. Data is going to return and I guess we'll just do, a quick message, and let's just say welcome to the third component. Let's just establish a quick div in here. With a quick h1, and we're going to just interpolate the string, and we're just going to do MSG. So now we have a third component. Like I said, this has no idea what third component, second component, it just knows what it is. All right, so to actually link this to the Vue router so we can actually start going to different pages, let's close out app.vue to get rid of the clutter. We want to go under this folder called router. And let's just actually close this one down. Folder called router, you're going to see something called index.js. This is where all your page routing comes into play. Right now you can see one path that says slash. It's just an ordinary slash, and you'll see the component and the name hello world. This actually says when the app loads at this path or this endpoint, I want you to load this component, which is the hello world.vue. And obviously we have hello world.vue loading another component into it. That has nothing to do with the router. We're going to come back to our index.js in the router folder. Now, what if we go to slash anything else? What will actually happen? Let's test that out. Let's see, slash third component. It doesn't know what that is, so it'll just show you a blank page. That's fine. We're going to fix that now. So all your routes are inside this array called routes, and we're just going to make a new object in this array. We're going to set a path for it. The path is actually going to be slash third. Actually, let's just do slash third component just to eliminate any sort of confusion. All right. And we're going to do name. We're going to call it third component because that's what we're actually trying to get. And the actual component itself that we're trying to call is called third component. But before you save this file, always remember to import the component at the top like we did in the other file when we wanted to add in the component. That's a very important thing. So let's just add the component really quick. This isn't a string, so no braces needed, or no quotations needed, sorry. Drop in our third component. Let's go to the very top. So now, just like how hello world is imported inside the router, give it a space. We're just going to do import third component from @/components /third component. Now we can save this and be satisfied that we have no errors. So before you put anything into the router, aka create a new page or have a component as a new page, you need to first define the path and the component. Second, actually put the import statement to get that component out of the components folder. All right, so now that's fine. Now what will happen if we go back to our Chrome browser and do /third component? Wow. We're at our third component now. Let me full size the screen. You'll actually see the path that is actually here. So in a nutshell, we've actually just made a single page application, because once index.html loads, all that happens is components being put in other components, components switching to other components, and things of that sort. Now, there are a couple of quick and dirty ways to actually switch between pages, right? And we're going to just put a few examples in here. So inside the, let's say inside the hello world component, which was our very first component, we're going to create a router link. And all a router link does is it's kind of like an anchor tag, with an href. That's all a router link really does. So we're gonna say to is saying what component. And remember, we gave each component inside a path a name. That's where the name comes into play. So now we're gonna say to third component. Let's just actually copy this now. So we're actually inside our first component, but for some reason the router link is not coming up, and I wonder why. Okay, so that small snag was actually due to a very silly error, because if we look on our page, we actually just can't see the link to the other component, right? That's not a problem. We're gonna fix that now. See these colons right here, or this colon? Remove the colon. And we'll have a link to our other page. Click that, we're inside the third component. But obviously inside the third component, we're gonna need a link to come back. So we'll just copy this line with the router link and put the appropriate component in there on the other page. So under message inside the third component, let's drop in a router link, and the page that we wanna go to is hello world.vue. And we're going to call this one go back. Now to actually go back to our home component, I just have to look at the path, and the path of the home component, let's just actually come back to index.js and check it out. It says hello world, the name is hello world, but the path is actually just a slash for our home directory. So we're just going to do slash, save that, and now the go back will work on our page. If you come to change component, it'll change, go back, it'll take us back. Change component, it'll change, go back, it'll actually take us back. And you can actually see inside here, we actually put one component inside another component. Now imagine having a navigation bar that doesn't have to change because the page changes, or having a sort of widget that you want to include on every single page. You can actually do that here. And to be honest, we can actually include the second component inside the third component for another example, just to show you guys how this works. Now the second component is already built. We don't have to type this HTML, CSS, and JavaScript again. All we simply have to do is go inside the third component and import second component from do a string at /components /second component. We've imported it into our project. Now we're gonna go under our data, establish a new set of fields for components. And inside here, we're gonna drop in second component. Now second component is recognized by our third component. All we have to do is just above the router link, create a new tag, because now we have a custom one, and just call this one second component. So we've actually just added second, so this is our whole entire component. It can be as large on the page or as small on the page as you guys want. It doesn't really matter. If you come back here, welcome to the third component. What's this? We actually have our second component in here. Go back, the second component is in the first and in the second page, and you can include multiple components inside each Vue page, so to speak. All right, guys, it's been your boy Six. Thanks for learning about the basics of Vue.js.